lazy inability sprung upon him. Reason told him pain so bad must end. House hummed quietly.
There wasn't any white light. I didn't go to meet Jesus. I didn't see my dead family members. It was just oblivion, and it was very frightening.
You think drug users are people that haven't had opportunities, perhaps had a really bad childhood and haven't been loved.
As soon as we found out about Peter's problem, we did nothing but help. And people still die from overdose, even if they've got all the love in the world.
But, often we expect people to get over it, but the event actually never leaves that family ever.
I've kind of experienced stigma, and judgments from people just by being the person who's grieving about losing their friend.
He always had lots of friends and he had a fantastic sense of humour. And they've never wanted for anything, and we've always been happy, there was no problems. We always used to say, "You okay, do you need money, whatever." So we couldn't understand what he needed this money. Why wouldn't he just come and ask us for the money, And all of a sudden he said, "I need it for heroin." And it was like something else had taken over. It wasn't Chris anymore. This terrible addiction was this monster that had taken over my son. Everyone I spoke to that I went to see more or less wasn't giving me what I wanted. They weren't giving me hope that Chris would get over it. That it was always, "Oh, well, he's on heroin, he's the only one that can help himself. You can't do anything." That's what I get. And I think, no, I'm his mum. I'm going to make him better. I'm going to get him, But I just couldn't.
Was really stylish and beautiful and wore classic clothes and would talk about being fashionable, not being trendy, and always had a beautiful haircut. Because he worked front of house in a restaurant, his appearance was really important anyway professionally. And it started when he was a teenager, and I know he was smoking a lot of pot, and talking to his friends really is how I found out about a lot of other stuff, and it just led from one thing to another, really. And he also working in hospitality, it's an industry that's really conducive to drug taking.
He was in this sort of alternative sort of rock and roll scene. Apart from his music career, he played with Tex Perkins and Charlie Owen and Don Walker in Tex, Don and Charlie. That was another band he was in. But apart from that, he was actually an engineer at General Motors. He loved having a good time. He was, sort of very kind of sparky, fun kind of guy. He had a cheeky grin. He was like a sort of kind of impish and fun.
My family decided I was hyperactive and I needed calming down. I didn't know this at the time, but I had a fall. I fell out of a car, banged my head. They sent me to the doctor, and I was prescribed Valium in large doses. The first dose actually knocked me out, and I collapsed face forward into my breakfast cereal. This is a time when they were very widely prescribed, Mother's Little Helpers, but I had very big dosages and continuous repeats, and this made me feel that if this was an allowable thing, then I started experimenting with illicit substances, with marijuana and opiates later on.
Yes, you do see a spectrum of inadvertent overdose, And people who don't have an illicit drug history, who might be recreational users once off and get into trouble by taking a large dose for them that they don't have any experience with. So there is a spectrum of people who are who are basically drug naive, up to those people who are long-term users of illicit drugs.
You know, we clicked, and I spent most weekends hanging out with Shane. It was Shane and I versus the universe for about 6 months there, and privately I think the most dangerous thing in Shane's life was the fact that underneath it all he struggled with anxiety and depression, and the way he medicated that was with alcohol and heroin.
I've worked in media all my life, magazines, newspapers, the wire service, so I managed to function. I realised I had to pull up and change. After my first near-fatal overdose, I nearly died. I was very lucky that somebody came into the room and found me. My lips were blue, I wasn't breathing, I had a syringe in my hand, and I was laying flat out on the bed like I'd been poleaxed, and they thought I was joking.
As soon as you start taking multiple drugs, and particularly illicit drugs, first of all, you never really know what's in them. You don't know the drug interactions that can occur, and often the effects of alcohol, for instance, and other illicit drugs are summative, so that what might not have affected you the previous week could have profound effects.
I had friends who fatally overdosed and died. I had friends who overdosed non-fatally and came out of it with acquired brain injuries. I have very sad memories of a couple of friends who were
With a severe acquired brain injury from a drug overdose, it can affect all parts of the brain, so that these poor people can be affected in their speech, their higher mental function, as well as the ability to move their arms and legs, even to walk, can all be affected.
You know, I say to him, Chris, we love you. I'd do anything, you know. Tell me what I can do. And he said, Mum, don't worry. I know how much to take. I'd be okay. Don't worry, and all this, you know.
I think it's fairly well known in the community that you develop tolerance to various drugs, that your body gets physiologically used to them, if you like. So that then if you go off those drugs for a while, the body down-regulates itself and is no longer used to those drugs. And so a similar dose that you were taking before has exaggerated effects. And so that someone who takes a holiday, if you like, from drugs and then has a repeat dose can get into a lot of trouble because the effects will be exaggerated.
It was really feeling positive for quite a while, and he was on a really good path, because I remember about 6 months or so before he died, we were out at a party and I was talking to him about it, and I remember thanking him for not dying. I remember saying, you could have died, and he said, no, I won't, and he smiled at me, and we had, poured another beer. And
Chris met Sarah, and Sarah was going to go back to England, and he decided he'd go over and get work, and we were thinking that would be good. He'd get right away, he'd be fine. At least there's a chance that he could just, turn over a new leaf. And he did, and he was over there for 18 months all up.
My parents had come down to Melbourne on a Thursday in March, it was 1999, to stay for the weekend, from Brisbane, I should say, because my family are all based up there, to meet my fiance's parents. I was about to get married about, a few months later. Mum and Dad kept trying to contact him that Thursday, and the phone rang through the morning, and then by the afternoon it was off. And on the Friday night we'd booked a table at a restaurant I was working at the time, and Mum and Dad were there, and the setting just stayed empty all night. We couldn't find him. They went back to Brisbane on the Sunday night, and by Monday Dad called the police, because we just knew. Peter and my mum were really close. Peter would never miss seeing Mum, and the police broke into his room and found him there, and he'd been dead the whole weekend, from what we understand.
The last job he had was at this hotel in Kent, Anyway, we got a phone call at 4 o'clock one morning. It was my niece's husband, because Rosie couldn't tell us, she couldn't tell us. And it was Terry, her husband, who rang us and said that Chris had died. He'd had that day off and he'd gone to London, unbeknownst to them and unbeknownst to us, to get this heroin. And he'd obviously taken it and he hadn't used it, you know, for so long, I suppose, that, and that's where he died, in the Angel Hotel, it was called.
I got a text message from Shane saying, you know, hey, what are you up to tonight? And I said, well, actually, I'm mastering my album and it would mean a lot to me if you could join me in the studio. And Shane has been championing my album, you know, he'd heard a rough mix of it. And for the 6 months that we spent hanging out, he was very kind of passionate about me getting back into music and doing something with the album. And we went back to my house. It was probably about 9 in the morning by that stage. And I had some Xanax tablets. Anyway, I took the tablet and went to sleep. And I woke up about 1 p.m. and my courtyard door was open. I mean, the whole thing was uncharacteristic for him. He never left without saying goodbye. Shane was a very sharp dresser. You know, he had great taste in clothes, and the hat that looks like a cap that he wore was, you know, very much a part of his outfit. And it was just very strange. I woke up, and the first thing I saw was his cap on the couch. I guess in hindsight, I was probably actually really scared because something seemed wrong, but it came out as anger, so I rang his mobile over and over again, and he didn't answer the phone, and I left some angry messages about, you know, disappearing on me and disappearing with my Xanax tablets, and eventually it probably would have been just after 2 p.m. I rang his phone again and someone answered, and it was a policeman, and they asked me to come down to the station, and at the station I learnt that Shane had been found dead at his house. He died of a heroin overdose.
When Peter died, my parents hadn't told any of their friends, and in his prayer book at the funeral, Mum and Dad had a paragraph written explaining how he died and what had happened, and all their friends, all they said was, why didn't you tell us? You know, we would have been here for you. And Mum, just being Mum, just said, I couldn't. I just didn't want to talk about it.
I wanted people to know, because I think, well, this has taken my son. And, you know, and all I wanted to do was to sort of just prevent other parents going through what we went through, you know.
Yeah, so we may see multiple overdoses all through the week, but for that family, it's the most important thing that's happened to them and will happen for them. And I especially think it's something that will stay with them for the rest of their lives.
I think you don't ever get over it, but you learn to live with it. And I would speak on my parents' behalf to say that I think they feel that. And I know Mum, if I ever talk about him with Mum, she just says she misses him. She misses him terribly, so, as we all do.
There have been too many losses, too many deaths, and not enough is said about it. These are not invisible people, they are real people.
There's so many people out there like yourself that are going through what you're going through, and they're there to help you cope, because it's just hard to do it on your own. You can't do it on your own.
Yeah, I think the what-if scenario is probably one of the worst to deal with for people, because there is no answer to what if. You can never go back and change things, and so it probably is more difficult to deal with when there's unanswered questions.
It's easy to judge people. It's easy to brush people off and make it sound like, oh, it was their fault. But to take time out and to just give them the compassion that they deserve and they need, I think that's really key.
Clumsy inability sprung upon him. Reason told him pain so bad must end.